The village in it with a map and a plan. No place too tiny for this determined man. Crossing the counties one by one, you'll see in every English corner a bit of history.
Hello folks, welcome back to Harborough once again. Now, today we find ourselves in a village that's very difficult for some non-locals to pronounce. Even I thought this was something different to what it actually is. I thought this initially was Leire, like Dragon's Lair or Witch's Lair. Instead, it's Leire. Leire, shallow, slow-moving river. Now this is an interesting little place. Welcome to the village which you could argue gives its name to the entire county of Leicestershire. Well, indirectly anyway. Let's explain. This is Leire, which itself is named after a watercourse originally known as the Leger, or more commonly the Leire. Nobody is totally sure of what that means, myself included, but from what I can gather, it seems to mean shallow, slow-moving river. That's a little ironic considering that the Leire might be the old name for the River Soar, which is anything but slow or shallow, especially by the time it gets to Leicester itself. In any event, the source of the Leire can be found to the east of the village, and it runs into the Soar before it hits the city. So this little-known village, 10 miles southeast of Leicester, can be thought of as the very root of the entire county's name, via the city, the river, and the old name for that river. If you trace it back like that, it makes complete sense. So, if this is the county's true root, what do we find at it? Well, aside from the Leire, Leire has two public houses called the Queen's Arms and the Crab and Cow, as well as a church, a village hall, and a riding establishment. It also has an old school which today is used as the village hall. It hosts a preschool group and the Dunton Scout group, amongst other things. Leire was also on the route of a now disused railway line, much like neighbouring Dunton. The difference is that the line in question here is not the same one. It was the Leicester to Rugby branch line, and here we can set foot on part of that old railway. Let's do just that as we explore the route of Leicestershire. So this is Leire as it was in 1900, and generally it looks almost the same as this today, but don't be deceived. Some subtle changes have taken place. Whilst the general form of the village is still as depicted here, a lot within it has altered. The main area of settlement is the main street, which runs from north to south. The northern end can be defined by an old railway bridge, and the southern end likewise by a road between Frolsworth and Dunton Bassett. It's hard to define where the dead centre of Leire lies though. Some may argue it's the church in the south of the village, whilst others may say it's the crossroads near the village hall. Take your pick. The source of the Leire, which gives the village its name, is to the east of it. We can't get to the exact source, but we can talk about what stands on that river. Let's get started with the southern end of the village, which has the church and a pub called the Queen's Arms. They are both still there and doing exactly what they were designed to. This part of the village has grown considerably otherwise. There are several new streets and cul-de-sacs now in place of these leafy open areas. We start in one of those new cul-de-sacs, St Margaret's Close off the Frolsworth Road. In and of itself, this street is nothing special. My apologies to anyone who lives in it. However, the residents of this street are able to say that they live close to one of the village's historic landmarks, Leire's first permanent school. And this is that building. Education in Leire can be traced back to the mid-1600s, but it didn't have anything approaching a permanent school until 1814. That's when this was built. It was funded by subscriptions, just under £180 in fact, helped to build this little school. It remained Leire's only school until 1873. We'll see the results of what happened in that year later when we reach the village hall. Next up we have the Church of St Peter, which has a squat tower and a recessed spire, easily the most characterful parts of this building. Otherwise it has a north aisle, a nave, a chancel and a south porch. The oldest part of the church is the tower, built of ashlar in the 14th century. The rest was rebuilt between 1867 and 1868, replacing an earlier structure. The architect was William Smith of London. Smith was the same guy who rebuilt the church at Showell on the other side of Lutterworth. It was his idea to add the north aisle here. He rebuilt this church with granite and a type of rock we've never met before, syenite. Syenite is similar to granite, but it has less quartz within it. St Peter's four-bay arcade with its layered coloured stone is similar to the one at Gilmorton. The floor has encaustic tiles, whilst pews and choir stalls are all made of oak. There is just the one interesting monument in this church, and it's to Susanna Smith, dated 1792. Only the tower, font and that memorial predate the Victorian rebuild. Nicholas Pevsner didn't like this church. He mentions in his entry for St Peter's that it seemed gloomy, although that was probably only due to the lack of a clerestory. Now, once you get beyond the church, you're then heading back towards Dunton Bassett and towards one of Leire's two mills. We'll talk a bit more about those later. You'll also find this path, which leads down to an extension of the churchyard, which we'll check out in a moment. There's no way through this. On the map, it does say there is, but for some strange reason, there isn't. I've just discovered that. And then what we'll do after we've had a look at that is we'll go back through this gate, take a right turn, go past the church and head for a pub. So next we have the first of a few pubs here in Leire. Some are still going, others not so. This one is the Queen's Arms. It's a former Marston's pub which was sold off as a free house a few years ago. Although the name is first recorded in 1840, the building is much older, as you can likely tell just by looking at it. Some sources date this as far back as the 1500s. The Queen's Arms was known to be linked to some manorial land, and so it may well have been built and owned by the Lord. A lively and popular village pub, it has a public bar to the front with a larger than usual snug annex. To the rear is the dining room and a lawned garden. The pub was often the setting for auctions and public meetings. In terms of ownership, the Ladkin family were licensees for over 60 years from the 1830s onwards. One former landlady, Jane Ladkin, was renowned for being a village personality and also a very big woman, literally. Occasionally her size led her to become trapped in railway carriage doors. In fact, her size was so great that upon her death her coffin was too large to go through the pub's door. To get her out, part of the pub's wall had to be dismantled. As well as being rather large, Jane was also known well for her fruit, grown within her very own orchard. Her plums were a special variety, which was sold at Leicester Market during the season. After her death, by sheer coincidence, the trees also died and her special variety was gone forever. Well, I've seen some cracking buildings already this morning. There were some good ones in Dunton Bassett, and there's been a few in Leire as well. But I think this is currently winning at the moment. This is the old manor, which is next to the Queen's Arms. Would you just look at how gorgeous this is? And check out on the roof up there, you can see some foxes in the thatch. Well, we are in Leicestershire after all. Now we're heading up into the north of the village, and arguably this is where all the good stuff is, and indeed was. Marked on this map are various things, beginning with this school. That's not a school anymore, as we'll see shortly. There's a chapel and two more pubs shown here as well, but none of them are the same as they were in these days. So the school is now the village hall, As a school, it was built to replace the one on Frolsworth Road in 1873. It was known as St Peter's School. Built in the Gothic arts and crafts style, it's a great example of this style which was often used for small village schools in the Midlands. It was erected by the local village builder, whose name is unfortunately unknown. Its site, though, was donated by the Lady of the Manor. It stands where a manor house used to be beforehand. One head teacher, Gloucestershire-born Caroline Goddard, who later became Richardson after marriage, ran it for 45 years. Speaking of the number 45, that was the average attendance too. On Mrs. Richardson's retirement in 1920, a lack of suitable accommodation made it difficult to appoint her replacement. So, therefore, the school closed, forcing children to walk 2 miles up the road to Dunton Bassett instead. That only lasted for 3 years though, and Leire did reopen in 1923. Despite that, the same issue persisted throughout its second stint, the difficulty in appointing a head teacher with suitable village accommodation. It closed again in 1945, but it was only ever supposed to be temporarily. That closure became permanent in 1947, and the building became the village hall instead. Just behind the school we have the second pub. This is the one labelled on the old map as being the White Horse. Now it's called the Crab and Cow, and it's more of a restaurant than a pub. It opened with the new branding in 2015 after serving as the White Horse since it was built way back in the 18th century. Extensively refurbished by the trio of Paul, Nathan and Cheryl Burrell, walk inside this now and you'll find it decked out in steely greys and blues. The general manager, Nick Broderick, formerly ran a style bar in Leicester and Rick Stein's seafood restaurant at Padstow in his native Cornwall. No surprise then that the menu here often features plenty of fresh fish, delivered daily from Cornwall, as well as local Leicestershire meat and produce. It's all within familiar gastropub territory, but it has enough to interest even the most diverse of palates. Mauritian fish curry, Singapore chili crab, and dishes which have hints of North Africa and Korea are all culinary delights you can find within these old pub walls today. You know what, this is the sort of village I love, and the reason for it is quite weird actually. It's the sort of village where you can stand in the middle of the road and not have any fear that anyone's going to come past and try and knock you over. Even that guy that just came past just now was quite happy just to sail straight through. It's just so quiet, and that's what makes this perfect, I think. I'm quite enjoying my time here so far. So we are in the middle of Main Street and we've seen a few of its properties already. Let's talk about a few more of them. Now, there used to be a third pub in Leire. It was called the Bull's Head, and now it's one of the houses that line the rest of Main Street between here and the Methodist Chapel. The Bull's Head, of course, was still marked on the OS map because it was still in business at that point. It closed in 1926. So anyway, this is Main Street, and doesn't it look fabulous, or is that just me? A couple of these properties have a story or two they could tell. Take Ash House, for example. This used to be a butcher's shop until its closure in the 1920s. In the past, Leire had its own blacksmith shop and a wheelwright too, but neither of them exist today. Get this though, before Ash House was serving meat, it actually had a religious purpose. Originally, it was used as a synagogue because there was a strong Jewish faction in this village. Now we're at the chapel, which was built in 1863 by the Ludford family. It's believed an earlier Methodist chapel once stood here before this one. If it did, it was built in 1817. This tallies with trade directories which in 1846 suggest there was only one chapel in Leire, which was Wesleyan and was built about 30 years ago, so says the text. Not everybody seems to be sure as to which denomination of nonconformists used this building at first. It's possible that the congregation here were primitive Methodists to start with, even though the date stone on the wall clearly says Wesleyan. For sure, by 1863, it was abundantly clear that the congregation were Wesleyans. It closed for worship in 1977 and is now a private residence. So many beautiful buildings, you just don't know where to look sometimes. Right, we've reached Stemborough Lane, and this is a dead end. It leads down to Leire's other mill. It's called Stemborough Mill, and it's close to that mill where the source of the Leire is. Again, we'll talk about this in a little while. Next job for us, though, is not to go down there. Instead, it's to go down here, back lane. We've walked almost all the way up Main Street, so now we have to make our way back to where we started. There are two ways to do that. The easiest way would be to just turn around and retrace our steps, but since when did I do things the easy way? Nope, for us it's back lane, which will take us to a section of the Leicestershire round footpath which crosses through Leire at Oak Avenue. See you shortly. Okay, we're back to St Margaret's Drive, but we're not quite done with Leire just yet. Of course, we still need to talk about those mills, but there's also something to the west of the village. Looking here from St Margaret's Drive, you can see the road heads off to the west towards Frolsworth. We're going down there in a few moments because we need to see something called the Jubilee Walk. Just before we leave Leire behind, there's another area we need to cover. On the road out of the village to the west is the playing field. It occupies this triangle of land here. Right next to it you can see the route of a railway line, and this is one we've never seen before. It's the now disused Leicester to Rugby branch line, and part of it is now open to the public. So this is the old railway line, and the locals know this beautiful spot as the Jubilee Walk. This railway cutting can be a real sun trap in the warmer months. It does get walked in the winter too by many, but you need your boots on because it becomes quite damp at that time of year. In 2010, some work was done to make pathways through the damper areas easier for walkers. It gained the Jubilee name in 2012 to celebrate the Queen's Diamond Jubilee. So what about the line that used to come through here then? Well, the Leicester to Rugby branch was only a short railway, but it was pretty important. It was part of the Midland Counties Railway, which the long-term viewers will remember us discussing the formation of back in the Eastward episode of Broxtowe. The network was designed to connect Leicester, Derby, Nottingham and Rugby together, linking them to the other Midland lines around Birmingham and therefore to London. The section between Leicester and Rugby was a little difficult to build. Progress was hampered by wet weather and the need for several long cuttings and embankments. There were 2 tunnels at Knighton and Ulsthorpe, and a bridge was also required to cross the River Avon and the Oxford Canal at Rugby. Leire never had a full-blown station on this line, but it did have a short-lived halt. It opened in 1925 and closed with the line in 1962. Half a mile of the line's former route through the cutting was donated by a parishioner and now has an abundance of documented flora and fauna, much used by walkers from Leire and beyond. And so to the playing field, which you can find tucked away in that little triangular patch of land next to the cutting. This was another charitable donation to the village, and today it's the site of the children's recreation area. The play equipment was bought thanks to village fundraising and grants. The playing field is also the main venue for the annual Leire Village Fete. This is the high spot of Fete Week and is the main village fundraiser. Normally there are games, stalls, teas and barbecues, bars, a music stage, a classic car show and a dog show too. Any money raised goes to the village and to the church. The annual Leire cricket match also takes place here, which sees the northern half of the village take on the southern half. I wonder, where do they draw the line? And here's one last section to finish off, concerning the two watermills that Leire has to its name. Both sit on the Leire, the rivulet that joins the Soar and gives its name to Leicester. One of them is called Harborough Mill. Its first written record dates back to 1212, but a mill on its site was recorded in the Domesday Book. It was once owned by the Earl of Aylesford during the Cromwellian government. There was no mention of the mill between 1279 and 1661, but it remained with successive earls until 1913. In 1920, Harborough Mill was purchased by George Pickering, who, with his son Len, worked it until 1944, when it was finally closed down after 730 years. In 1981, the Cherry family bought the mill and painstakingly restored the water wheel, some 16 feet in diameter, to its former glory. They used the mill water to build up a trout farm, which was designed to produce 12 tons of rainbow trout every year. The other mill was simply called Leire Mill, and it operated on the same stream. It was built in 1773. Its machinery is no longer there, unlike the one at Harborough. Its wheel was 13 feet in diameter and was the breast shot type. Leire Mill has now been converted into a private residence. By the way, it's not known if Harborough was ever a little hamlet in its own right, built up around the mill, but it's likely, I'd say. As well as the mill, some brickworks once existed in the area too. Incidentally, the Goldens, who lived at Norfolk House in Leire, had a large poultry enterprise in Harborough Lane. Their unique variety of light Sussex was renowned throughout the country. So that's Leire, everybody, and what an interesting little village that was. Tomorrow we're going to another that has a bit of a storied past. Just up the road is a linear village that looks quite similar to Leire, but it's seen a raft of changes, rendering it almost unrecognisable since the turn of the 20th century. See you there. Now, just before I go, remember, this video is part of a huge project to visit every civil parish in England. That's more than 10,000. These routes are pre-planned, and due to time constraints, I can't cover every detail or walk down every street. Please don't complain if this video missed something out. I pronounce names how I choose to. I am very aware that local dialect may vary, and I don't take kindly to criticism about this. You've been warned. It's impossible to know everything too. If this video was terrible, make your own. If you're a regular watcher of The Village Idiot, you're not the only one. If you've got a small business, why not use my videos to advertise it? Leave a comment below if you're interested. And finally, thanks for watching this episode, everybody. Give us a like and a subscribe if you've enjoyed this episode, and share it with your friends and relatives. It all helps to keep this mission going. Until next time, I've been Andy, also known as The Village Idiot, and I'm out.